Welcome to Twilight Garage. David Rogerson here. We're going to be delving into sex, drugs, rock and roll, and all things counterculture here on Twilight Garage each week with my co-host, the great Casey Fields. We're going to be joined by a bevy of experts in each of our subjects. Currently, we're dealing with all things MANSON, and we have the great Deb Silva as a regular expert and contributor. Thank you so much for your subscriptions and your support. We are here for you. We are doing this for free out of the love of the expression of this case and keeping things fair and fun.
The Twilight Garage podcast is brought to you by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Woo! Coming at you live from the Brothership Connection. So we're starting with a ship because we don't have enough people for a hood yet. But let me tell you, each single subscriber that's been happening, there's no lie to you. I'm getting all excited. I'm like a little girl watching our channel. So stoked. Thank you all for everything. Again, we start with gratitude and love from Twilight Garage, our great producer, Mr. Alex Marino. Ha ha, good times. And my co-host who, wow, there's some...
I don't know the name. You know?
Have you guys heard this?
Casey Fields. I don't know the name. You know?
Hold up. I want to say the name one more time.
Casey Fields. I don't know the name. You know?
Best ever, Casey Fields. How have you been, my brother?
I feel the love. Thank you.
Man, we are having a little bit of an impact in the MANSON sphere. It feels kind of cleaning things up a little bit in a good way. I've noticed we've had some fun things happening online. I wonder if we're going to have our girl, Allie, as James Dawson calls her. Well, I was on the phone with Allie recently, and she may be joining us, of all people. And again, we're reaching out.
Nancy as well.
Well, man, Nancy, good Lord. Today, we're going to follow up part 3 about Dianne Lake. And as always, we just dive in. You know what we're talking about. You're not some neophyte loser who has never read anything about the case. We assume you're going to be the people calling in and going, actually, the child's mother was... last week, I noticed on part 2, you said sometimes they're referred to as Richard and Allegra. Other times they're referred to different couples. Because as we're going to find out, Dianne Lake had a bit of an interesting counterculture history before her introduction ultimately to Charles Manson, which so much is made of, which is ostensibly why we're speaking about her here. Obviously on Twilight Garage, though we will eventually become a counterculture channel. I keep promising. It's just so damn hard to get out of this beautiful story that is just so multifaceted. And in this case, rather harrowing for a young girl of 14. We are mainly introduced to her in the Manson sphere. And it's said that her parents signed a note and quote unquote handed her over to Charles Manson, but she had her own transitions. She went up and down the coast on her own, had some pretty ugly experiences with some people. Mm-hmm. Her family rode on the black bus out towards where I grew up in the Ridgecrest area. They didn't quite get out to Death Valley, but they did make it out to the desert, spend some time together, bond over LSD. So we have Dianne Lake's parents doing LSD. Now, if we think about LSD and the identity of the substance within the United States, it used to be Timothy Leary. It used to be Tune In, the whole thing. You had to
Ken Kesey acid experiments.
big literary thing. Now it seems to boil down to this small group of people known as the Manson family when you talk about acid. And to think about this girl who had been through so much, and then if we look at her story, her transformation and the ultimate reentry into normal society, it's pretty extraordinary in and of itself. But to be a girl who your father gave you LSD when you were 13 years old.
Yeah, she started adulthood as a preteen.
Correct.
And I mean,
taking care of her, her younger siblings.
Grew up way too fast. Nowadays, they say that adolescence is going into his 20s.
Correct.
Some kids are like 25 or so when they leave.
Well, your brain
home,
is developed at 25 as a male, usually 26 years old.
Yeah.
On average. That's why your insurance rates go down so radically at that point.
Can't run a car until 25.
No. And that's why we learn how to steal them. But the thing was, with Dianne and her story, her father was just such a miscreant loser and man devoid of any conscience or normal sense of responsibility. He would speak this big bohemian, change the male-female dynamic. We're going to free women of their domestic yoke. Yet he would lay around with dirty dishes after his wife prepared dinner and watch her do all the housework around him, including clean up the dishes, while he sits there and smokes weed and talks about liberating women. And then when she had an anxious breakdown, many times in this family, the father would have, I felt, a manic episode. And it would manifest itself in him having this hatred for his father, who he knew was this pedophile hunk of shit, right? So he's trying to cast off anything he identified with the establishment or his father, or anything that was straight or work, or anything that wrinkled the brow in a way that he didn't like. So this fucking guy just became a bitch every now and again when he would get a hair up his ass and forget that he was.
He was dropping out kind of at a late age, right?
Correct.
This was almost like a midlife crisis.
3 kids.
Yeah.
Missing tooth. 100 red short cigarettes a day. Old lady had watched him ruin their life, as we discussed in previous episodes. Well, this last time, they get into this fucking bread truck situation. They've reduced the Santa Monica home, which was somewhat happy for Dianne, even after all the trauma they had put her through.
Yeah, and I mean, weren't they inviting a bunch of people to move in with them at that point?
The entire staff of the Oracle was living with them. It was like 30 deep. We've got people fucking in the living room. These kids they come into their room and it's like, well, there's 9 people in my room. Like,
wow.
And they don't talk to the kids. It's just you come home and you fucking deal with it. Don't be such a hung up little shit. And that's the way we got treated as kids. I remember we get tossed into a room where our parents were partying in the early 70s with everybody else's parents, right? So the kids were together, like in my room or somebody's room, depending on whose home we were at. And you didn't come out. You didn't fucking interrupt the adults. You know what the fuck you do? You fucking figure it out amongst yourselves. And dude, the shit we got into, oh man, all the touchy-feely organ grinding. Dude, I mean, this sounds all crazy with Dianne Lake, but I see her. Dude, I would have been like Paul Watkins. I'd have been 12 years old trying to just snack upon it. You know, that was right up my alley. That's why when I met the Manson kids in Ridgecrest in the later 80s, I was a bit older. I'd come back to town and those kids were wilding out, dude. They wanted to fuck and hang out and have a good time. And hey man, it didn't seem weird. It was normal shit. We were doing the same stuff. So Dianne, just wow.
Yeah, tragic. I don't remember if I talked about last episode, Kim Fowley.
No, but that whole thing that she was ready for Kim Fowley, the very, very, very famous
Mm-hmm.
glam rock, hard rock, punk rock impresario who brought so much to LA culture, who much was made of about breaking the black hearts who were very young. He had a terrible reputation with young girls, but then there's some glimmer of hope. He didn't steal this young girl's virginity and be a piece of shit. Like,
Yeah, which
I mean, he
is
kinda
amazing
eyeballed her.
because she was obviously down, and he didn't take advantage of the situation, which seems a little out of his character.
I mean, beyond having
I
her
watched a documentary on
be
him on
dancing naked
YouTube,
above
and
him.
they talked about how he was almost like another Charlie Manson of Hollywood back in those days.
Absolutely, yeah, that
Very
club.
influential. A lot of people, a lot of charisma. People wanted to be around him.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, him and Rodney Binghamire, they had that whole trip. They had that
A
club-
mayor of what do they call him? Mayor of Beverly Hills or something?
mayor of Sunset.
A Sunset.
Beverly
that's
Hills,
it.
man. No, man, I used to
Sunset.
give the Canadian a hard time because he didn't know, the whole motivation of driving. Like, that was the one thing I was watching. They went to LA, Paul and Duty were driving around LA, and he was like, well, I just blah, blah, blah. And he'd missed the motivation because LA is all about driving and these strategies and this totally different way of thinking. And if you don't understand LA and the subtleties, there's a lot in this case you can miss. If you're from the East Coast, if you're from somewhere else, a lot of the things are missed. And that's why these little things are so fucking important. And you got to stay with me here, babe. Sunset. But yeah, Kim Foley, these guys were hugely influential. And these men were all around her circling. And then she was heartlessly cast out of the hog farm because they had this hierarchy. They didn't want to change anything. They didn't want the Romney reign to be different. And much is made of Charlie's initial foray into the hog farm. Now, what was your understanding of that?
I mean, I've read different things on it. I don't know what's true. Some people have said that he was trying to take over the hog farm. I don't really think so. I think that he was just up there hanging out, kind of seeing how they did things. This is right in line with the way that Charlie was back in 67 and early 68, where he was bouncing around, checking out different communes.
As one would do.
Yeah, like here in the Bay Area, he checked out a place up in Novato. He checked out a commune in San Francisco. So yeah, I think he was just getting the vibe. We know that he was in and around Charlie Melton's commune down in Lower Topanga. So only natural to check out another commune.
Well, there were so many Charlies, Blackbeard Charlie, Charlie Melton, and then Charles Manson becoming known for a time, Black Bus Charlie. And that little top hat on there, I guess, because there was a ventilation situation on top of it, right?
And Bobby Beausoleil and Catherine Scher both came out of also Charlie Melton's commune, Bible Charlie.
Well, I found it interesting, too, that Dianne and her family had cleaned up the spiral staircase house, spent a great deal of time, effort, and energy painting it, cleaning it up after some heroin addicts had it as a shooting gallery and really ran it into the ground and made it quite disgusting. So they cleaned it up a bunch. She is out traveling. She's doing her business up and down the coast and then coming back to her family and expecting them to be glad to see her. And she pulls up to the hog farm. They're just pretty indifferent to see her.
Mm-hmm.
And that really crushes her. She had seen on her first acid trip where her dad had given her LSD less than a year earlier. So she's like 13. Second time she does acid with the family, her younger brother and sister are initiated. So you got to figure they're like 10, 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you're dosing kids with full Jimmy Orange Sunshine. Wow, dude, you're a fucking piece of shit, dude, with your fucked up tooth, your cigarettes. And then, like I say, they were getting in the bread truck for this final foray before Dianne flaked off And now she's come back, right? But before they even left for that trip, they're downsizing. The kids are freaking out. Mom tries to talk to dad about it, and he just lays her out with a belt across the face, bro. Like that's the dude who's championing women's liberation. And that's what people were up against. There was a lot of side mouth talking. And it was very unfortunate for a lot of the women involved that these men had these big mouths that talked about these high-minded ideals. And then they were rooted in this very chauvinistic, feminine objectification, just really negative spiral, especially for girls like Dianne. So then she has the second acid trip. Here's the voice, because the first one, she has a connection with her parents in this brainstem, and it's severed. In her first trip, second trip, she hears a voice which she thinks is divine. And it tells her it's time to leave home. It's time to leave your parents and be your own individual. She told her mom that. What's mom say?
I can't remember.
Oh, honey, you're just on acid. It's cool. You know, the bread truck and wavy gravy not wanting you to fuck everyone. Instead of, hey, y'all, as Deb Silva would point out, if she were here, I'm sure she'd like pop up. Well, you know, David, I find it interesting that Wavy Gravy and his wife would just sit there with a straight face, David, and Wavy Gravy would throw down the gauntlet of, you've got to close your legs, babe, because you're jailbait. Get out. When really, you know, she would say, hey, how about you tell those creepy old men to keep their penises out of, you know, like, wow. And that's the truth. Like, we were in a very different time. And then even when there was some love for it, like you read when she met Charlie, he's hella older. Hella older. So she's going through all these changes. She thinks her mom is down with her getting kicked off the hog farm. Come to find out, her mother didn't know. So she's off the hook. And it was the dad who gave Hugh Romney, the Mormon, Wavy Gravy. You know, dude has like, dude, he's got Utah money. That motherfucker has Utah money. Don't come at me funny. Here's the thing. With those Rocky Mountain Hebrews, bro, they got the Skrilla, baby. They're not, you'll never see a broke Mormon, dude. You know what I mean? Anyway, so there they are. And Romney's got his thing going down. And he gives her this bad invective. Well, mom isn't down with any of that. Goes looking for Bebe, who doesn't even say goodbye because she's just like, crushed. I'm out. Second acid trip, comes out of it crushed, leaves. And then her mother's like, hey, man, where's Dianne? So much ado is made of a lot of that. But some of that was Dianne being hard-headed, which was real natural. And her poor little heart had been crushed by her stupid dad so many times, who is now at this point calling himself Chance. And he had a bandana that said, Chance. I mean, we've all met a tool bag like that, right?
Yeah, and it looks like mom had her enough with it as well.
Yeah, that was the beginning of the end for them, she
Yeah.
said, is once she saw that, she was like, But it's like, wait a minute, they went through so fucking much. The trust was really broken in 67. Is that first love-in.
They would have been better off staying in Minnesota.
They just left her at this love-in thing. I'll meet back at the car. And they fucking left her at the Griffith Observatory alone. And she comes home and they're just like, hey, what's up? And you can tell mom was bummed, but dad was like, something came up. Something came up and you leave your 12-year-old daughter. So that's an upshot for me.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of compassion, like I say, for Dianne. And for me, that changed a lot. Because it was hard to get over her her testifying against everybody. Because you would,
And we'll get to that too.
You would see all the things that she comes through, which is what are you feeling the next big pivotal thing was after she split from the hog farm?
Well, we left off last episode, her with the family. This was summer of 68. She spent that time with Dennis Wilson, right? The girls. And then she was at Spawn Ranch and in the Yellow Submarine House in 69.
Okay.
And we left off in July of 69 where she was with Nancy Pittman while Charlie was recording at Brother Records at Brian Wilson's house. And Brian Wilson's wife found them skinny dipping in the pool. Then we come and we have the murders of the Tate LaBianca murders. And then shortly after that, just a few days on, I believe, August 12th or 13th, she ends up meeting Tex out at Olancha with Hugh Rocky Todd. So they're just kind of, Tex is hiding out at that point. It was Manson's way of getting a couple of the teenagers away from the ranch, again, trying to limit that liability. And they got no food. And from what I understand of this place, Hunter Ranch in Olancha, which was Roy and Joy Hunter's place, Dave Hannum's aunt and uncle, is there were just a couple little outbuildings, little shacks. There was no residence. And so they were basically camping out on this piece of land, using the irrigation ditch to bathe in and swim in, but no food. I guess Tex was using whatever little money that they had to buy newspapers, checking on what was being said in the news after the murders. And then Dianne decides, I'm going to go out to the highway in Olancha, right across from, what was it called? Is it Ranch House, Mark?
It was the Ranch House Cafe, and it was right there on 395. And it was a beautiful, beautiful place. It had a counter facing the Eastern Sierra. It was just absolutely stunning. The kitchen was behind it. It reminded me a lot of the cafe that is still in Ridgecrest, the Midway Cafe on China Lake Boulevard in Ridgecrest, California, 93555. If you're ever in Ridgecrest, please check out the Midway Cafe. But it was there, and then there's all these Calverts. And they're right on the water. I mean, right on the road. And why I say water first is because it just will take your mind away when you see it. It's so distracting. This gorgeous, crystalline water is so thick and active and alive and obviously pure. You want to touch it. And as a kid, we'd see those Calverts and, you would stay away from them because, they'd grab you and kind of tear you up. And the shit is freezing cold. Because it's snow melt.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And so it is absolutely pristine. It is Eastern Sierra Nevada snow melt just coming through these Calverts. And that's where much is made of her swimming around naked around the time Tex basically confessed the murders to her. But she'd been through so much at that point. I want her to come on here and clarify a few stories. Much ado is made of her violation at Spawn Ranch. But also, a lot of the things she said were pretty positive about going back to the spiral staircase house before this, about meeting up with these different people, about, like you said, traveling around with that photograph and meeting the family.
She definitely sounded positive on it. Like there were a lot of good memories.
And then the whole Dennis Wilson thing. It's really hard to understate the excitement of that. And then the guy that she idolized, because the first thing he did with her when he got her alone in the Black Moss, fairly immediately, it was that first day, put his hands out and they did just basically the mirror moves, right? And got her in the motion, as they used to say, right? Put the girl in the motion, put the motion in the girl. And it went down for her. And what'd she say? I was hooked. So there you go.
So going back to Olancha, she was across the street at It used to be a gas station.
Yep.
And she was hitchhiking going north on 395.
Which is
And
towards
yep.
Independence.
And next thing you know, she gets picked up by California Highway Patrol Officer Dennis Cox.
Woo!
And Dennis Cox basically writes her a citation for hitchhiking, asks for a driver's license. Again, she had a fake ID, no proper license in possession. So he puts her in the car, drives her up to Independence.
Which is about an hour.
Yep.
It's
And
cold, probably.
has her in jail up there, asks her, where's your mom and dad? He got conflicting stories. She said she wasn't sure if they were in Arizona or New Mexico. So he runs her file, finds out that she had an arrest in Ventura County. We talked about that in a prior episode.
Right.
And
Boosty,
he calls down to LASO, and they tell him that she's 21 years old. So their information that they had on file was very wrong. So he goes to District Attorney Frank Fowles and asks, what should I do here? He says, let her go. So he drives her back down to Olancha and drops her off. And there she's back there with Tex and Hugh Rocky Todd. During that time, also, Bruce Davis was coming and dropping supplies off from the Spawn Ranch. And she was going back and forth with Bruce Davis at the time. I guess that George Spawn had like a tractor trailer rig.
Right.
Yeah, that they were filling up
it's a fifth wheel trailer arrangement for pulling horses. You can take at least 10 horses in tandem in that unit if you look at it.
So they were using this as what Bugliosi calls a staging point, right, in the desert, even though it's not very close to Spawn Ranch. But they were taking huge drums of oil and, car parts, dune buggy parts, and just taking it out to Olancha. And then shortly after that, towards the end of August, she returns with Tex and them to Spawn Ranch. This is right around the time that Shorty Shea was killed. And around the end of the month, they go out. The whole family goes out to Barker Ranch. Charlie is now taking her and all the rest of the young girls and young guys and the toddlers out there. He needs to get them away from the ranch. So they park at the base of Goler Wash, stay the night. And the vehicle that they were in couldn't make it through Goler Wash. It was too big. So Tex drove one of the power wagons halfway down Goler Wash. So they hiked halfway up, caught a ride the rest of the way with Tex. And this is really the season between late August until the two raid dates in October. So they're spending time out there at Barker Ranch.
Those are the times, Dianne, when you come on Twilight Garage, we'll be asking you about those movements and those periods, because I think that's what's fascinating to me. I think that was very difficult on most of the girls. I think that's where Lynette and really strong-minded women really just kind of locked into an ideal, and the hardships didn't bother them because they had ideals and feelings and deep love for Charlie. Whereas like some of the other people, your Barbara Hoyts, these other more reactionary girls, they're not the thermostat setting the temperature, they are definitely the thermometer reacting.
Mm-hmm. This is where Dianne says that once out at Barker, she testified that Leslie told her about the murders. She said that she stabbed someone in Griffith Park, which she's referring to the La Biancas. She says that she saw Leslie burn a purse. She talks about some coins.
Yeah, the whole coin purse situation.
Yep. And around this time, Tex is running what she calls as like a kill school. Tex is allegedly telling the girls, hey, if anybody comes up from the city, you got your knife, you got to be ready to stick them. So he's running them through like a weird a hand-to-hand combat type school. allegedly. And also around this time, they're having a good time as well. Charlie and some of the girls, including Dianne, they go up to the hot springs. They're out and about throughout Death Valley. They go up to Furnace Creek. They're at Stovepipe Wells, and even higher, Hunter Mountain. And just having a good old time. Charlie blew a tire out on the racetrack playa, which is kind of funny. They abandoned a car they rented in Canoga Park out there in the middle of nowhere. But one day they decided to get back on the highway patrol, and the Rangers, who were putting these big potholes in the road, which are making them blow out tires all the time. So they decided to set fire to their brand new earth mover, a Michigan loader tractor. So the way that Dianne tells us is basically they siphoned the gas out of it and lit the controls and the seat on fire.
Which is pretty funny to me, this whole deal that they would abandon a vehicle in the middle of desecrating an ancient, irreparable dry lake bed.
I think they were like trying to clear out a road to a mine. There was a couple mines up there. Yeah.
They were making their own roads. But they were also cutting across the playa. Like, you're not supposed to be driving out on the goddamn playa, bro. What? That shit is like, dude, if you leave a tread mark out there, we're talking about a 25,000 year lifespan of one set of tire tracks. So you've desecrated this goddamn thing, right? So if you go out there, if you fly a drone out there, you can see right where the family did. It's all still there. You can see it plain as day.
If you look it up in the racetrack playa, you'll see these rocks that have these trails behind them.
Because the wind is so fierce, it'll blow across. And that's what these girls, they endured. They must have endured. I've been out there blowing sandstorms, all those places you talk about, Stovepipe Wells, Furnace Creek. I've been to all those places. Camping at Darwin Falls every fall, going in the town of Darwin, seeing all the hippie trippers. They're making this like concrete thing when I was out there one time.
There's a place called Panamint Springs.
Yeah.
Near there is Father Crowley Point, which is allegedly where Philip Tenerelli ran off the cliff and crashed his car. Also, there's a place called Star Wars Canyon, which is where our military flies jets through there. They do canyon maneuvering. Really cool.
That's the VX5 group out of China Lake, California. They are naval airmen generally, sometimes joined by a U.S. Marine Corps airmen, but they run that whole alley pretty regularly. My father worked. There's a place called Trona, and then right on the edge of that was a place called Skytop. On this mountaintop where my father worked, it was on the edge of the Naval Weapons Center. Well, they come off of that property, sweeping into the monument, and they roar through there. And it's very exciting. But all those places were great that you're talking about.
So really, the reason I bring that up is because it's the burning of that earth mover which got them on the radar of Inyo County and the Rangers. Right now, they had an aggressive move towards law enforcement by burning up their vehicle, and now they're going to great lengths to track down this group of hippies that people are seeing throughout the desert, and they're actually calling them out by their vehicles. They're saying, oh, yeah, there's a dune buggy with a red Toyota Land Cruiser.
That was one my father saw, and I didn't believe. I mean, I'm not going to say I didn't believe my dad, but we're Irish, okay? Love to spin a yarn, and my dad did have FJ Land Cruisers. My father would go up and Goler Wash. We did go by Barker Ranch. I mean, we've been up there, but my dad would say, it was the fall. It was a fall of 69. I saw a red Land Cruiser. Well, guess what? Years later, because I didn't follow through, like I say, there was a big period in my life where this subject was pretty ugly to me. And then so now I read some books a few years later. Man, dude.
Yeah, so they had planes in the sky. They were searching everywhere for this red Land Cruiser, right?
Yeah.
And eventually they made their way over Goler Wash, and they saw that it parked down there at
That
Barker Ranch.
and those goddamn dune buggies they'd been
Mhm.
hearing about.
Yep.
Because they'd be tearing around Rommel style, doing these Africa Corps maneuvers in 3 or 4 dune buggies. And my father had claimed that he popped up over the ridge in his FJ-45, and it's a sand-colored unit. And he said that he had met Tex Watson there, not by name, but he said, "That dumb Texan." My mother was from a similar area to where Tex Watson came from. So he's just that nitwit. So apparently he couldn't figure out vacuum advance distributors very well. So my dad got a couple of their units worked out according to my dad, which, you know what I mean? Someone's walking around saying, "I fixed Charlie Manson's dune buggies." Like, but that was how things were in town because there'd be so many different points of contact. So they're out there. She's a little girl. So you think about the amount of time that she spent there
Mm-hmm.
at her age. What a gnarly impression. Just the isolation, the howling of the wind. And then I want to know what they were talking about.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in the family, right? Different people had different attitudes. I know that around October 9th is when Stephanie Schramm and Kitty Litchinger bounced, right? And Dianne recounts that account. And she says that they were beating the bushes and the dune buggies looking for those 2 girls, you know?
And if they would have found them, it would have been good for them.
Would not have been good. And so those girls made their way out to, I guess, a main road and got picked up by a CHP officer who took them in and interviewed them. This is all a part of law enforcement's reconnaissance and getting ready.
The cafe thing where Charlie
that was Barbara Hoyt. That was a different one, but
that's what I thought.
All around the same period.
Right. Lutzinger was pregnant with who?
Bobby Beausoleil's
child. Bobby
yeah.
B.
Yeah. So Dianne, that kind of scared her because she saw how aggressively they went after those 2 girls, you know, never got a hold of them. But yeah, so law enforcement's got their eyes on Barker Ranch. And so eventually they get their warrant and they get their enough different organizations. You got the Inyo County Sheriffs, the California Highway Patrol, and the Park Rangers. And they're all doing this in tandem.
Interjurisdictional cooperation when you get a task force together like that. For these gentlemen, it's a wet dream. It really is, because they have a lot of respect for each other. You've got Ranger Dick Powell. You know, you've got Gardner, Mr. Jack Gardner. You have all these larger than life characters. You got your boy Don over there. Deputy Don
Ward.
You love Don Ward.
So yeah, in the early morning hours of October 10th, Dianne says that they get raided. Barker Ranch gets raided, right? She says that she hid underneath the tarp. So she wasn't arrested in that first roundup. The cops took a bunch of people, about a dozen, and then the rest just scattered into the hills and hiding everywhere.
Charles Manson.
And then 2 days later, on October 12th, they have the second Barker Ranch raid at Twilight. And then they round up the rest of them. They get Charlie and Dianne gets arrested in that raid.
The whole story that, you know, it's oft retold of Charlie popping out of that vanity. And we're going to get to the bottom of the story of that vanity, because his next stop is that jail cell door leaning on my eastern wall. Now, do we have some time here to get into this exciting roundup? Now, what did you think was the craziest? Because they're scared. You know, after people got rolled up, Charlie's, you know, is he fired up? Is he like, you know, what the fuck?
Yeah, you guys know me pretty well. Like, I'm not a huge Manson supporter by any means, but I think a lot for him for this one way. So on October 10th, Nancy Pittman and I forgot who the other one was. They were on their way driving back to Barker Ranch. They ran into law enforcement. They hauled butt back to the ranch. Charlie and a bunch of people saw them coming, and that's when they took off hiding, right? Now, Nancy Pittman, gosh, I can't remember who the other one was. But they were kind of surprised 2 days later when they brought Charlie into Inyo County Jail, because they thought, man, he had 2 days head start to get away from the cops. He could have bounced out anywhere. He could have gone to Mexico. He could have gone up north and just gone into hiding. But they were shocked when they saw him get brought into the jail, arrested.
Well,
So
again, this whole Christ-like aura and mythos that gets thrown on him, Son of Man, is very interesting, because if you think about it, he could have, as we said, taken off before the raids in LA.
Mhm.
He could have taken off before the murders.
Mhm.
And instead, he was in Devil's Canyon getting his britches adjusted by, again, Nancy Pittman, the night of the Tate murders. He could have just stayed away, but Lynette Fromey, beseeched him to stay. And he kept sticking with these kids.
He cared about those kids. He was
God
loyal to those kids.
Dang noble.
He wasn't going to
to
let those
right?
kids take the brunt of it,
And that's what's so weird. On one hand, he's here having sex with a 14-year-old girl in the form of Dianne Lake, which is very repugnant, right? But on the other hand, he so loved these children, these girls, these people that he had grown very affectionate towards, that, hey, man, I'll face what they're going to face. He would grouse and get mad. You guys are going to get me locked up again. But in the end, did he act on that? No, he didn't. And he stayed true to his people. And it seemed like he was more upset about the idea of them getting locked up, because they didn't know what was in store for him. He was made for it.
So in Inyo County Jail, they had these were snitching. People were snitching back and forth. Not Charlie, but others, right? And they were trying to pin this earth mover arson on Charlie and Dianne Lake. So even into December, the charges were still on Lake. She was going to get hard with that. Eventually, I think that Charlie probably took the blame for it, because she got cleared. Her charges got dropped, and he was the one who would have faced penalty for that had it not for being them figuring out the murders. So once he got prosecuted in Los Angeles, the grand jury happened. The charges, all their things up in Inyo County kind of got dropped. Frank Fowles had an agreement with Vincent Bugliosi that said, hey, man, if you guys don't get them down there, we'll prosecute them up here.
Well, it's kind of like, I'm very surprised that Beausoleil got a parole recently, because there's a lot of hidden agreements and different law enforcement handshakes that took place at those times, like what you're talking about, that aren't as well known outside of the researching community. And there's so many strings attached to these things. But yeah, this minor girl, she's in this very cold, isolated, high altitude jail in Independence, California, which is the seat of Inyo County in California. And that's where we're going to leave it now. This poor young girl, Dianne Lake, sometimes Diane Bluestein. God bless you, little girl. Until next week, I'd love to throw you a blanket. And if your reps are out there, if your HarperCollins people are out there, we want to play nice. We're going to be here, hopefully, talking to Diane very soon. Until then, Twilighters, let me just say, good Lord, inspiring dread and awe on the internet, my co-host. I can never hear the name Casey Fields again without without hearing Casey Fields. I think that was one of the most amazing things that's just seriously ever happened in the universe. I just can't. I don't know. I'll ever get over this.
I don't know the name. You know,
Like, what? Dude, that was an all-star cast.
I don't know the name. You know,
So great. All-star cast. Just shock and dread.
Shout out. What's up there, Teal Beers? Miss
Hey,
you all.
We are glad you're here, though. Thank you very much for being here. And we just in good fun. We love you very much for all of your contributions over the years, Mr. BD, and all your people are more than welcome here. We want to also take this opportunity to send blessings to our PCasters out there and wish Paul the best in his departure from the subject and his very gracious abdication and directing of his fans to us and to Nancy Farrell's project. And we really greatly appreciate you.
True crime and moonshine.
And we want to know, just put it out there to you PCasters. We're here for you. We love you. Thank you for coming along as well. And subscribe. You know what gets me hotter than a double ARP discount? That's right. When you like and subscribe, babe. And that's the way it was on Twilight Garage. In the year our Lord, 2025.